heat exchanger. So when process, let's say the mass flow rates are available, but only inlet temperatures are known, at that time we could find out the heat transfer rate and the outlet temperatures of the fluid with the help of the effectiveness NTU method. But this method could have been applied in place of the LMTD method, say in case of the shell and tube heat exchanger problem also, which we have already solved, right? So in that case, we had solved it by LMTD method, and LMTD for the counter flow, then multiplied it with the correction factor, and finally found the area required for the required heat exchange. Now this problem could have been done with the help of the effectiveness NTU method also. So there you find out the heat capacity rate on the tube side, the hot water, on the shell side, the cold water. Then the ratio of that is CR, and you know the actual heat transfer rate, that is MCP delta T of any one of the fluid. And maximum heat transfer rate is always the minimum heat capacity rate multiplied by the hot water temperature minus cold water inlet temperature, right? Both are inlet. So maximum temperature difference in the heat exchanger. So that gives you the maximum possible heat transfer rate. And from that you get the effectiveness. Now you can use the correlation or the formula for NTU, which is expressed as a function of CR and effectiveness. So because you already know CR and effectiveness, right? So you can see the tables on the right hand side for different types of heat exchangers. Different formula are to be used. So for double pipe there is a formula, then shell and tube. For a single tube side, shell side pass and multiple tube side pass, there is a formula. If it is a cross flow heat exchanger, then there is a formula. So similar to the formula for effectiveness as a function of NTU and CR, you can have formula for NTU as a function of effectiveness and CR also. So this gives you NTU, and NTU definition is UA upon C minimum. So based on that you can get the area, and you will be able to verify that the area that you get with the effectiveness NTU method and the LMTD method would be the same. Okay, so only the method is different, and some people prefer effectiveness NTU method more, and it sounds more sensible to them. Okay. Okay, now moving further, if you observe the effectiveness versus NTU graphs, you'll be able to observe certain characteristics. So those are mentioned here. So this lecture will mainly follow the book from Cengel. So we make the following observation from the effectiveness relations and charts already given. 1. The value of effectiveness ranges from 0 to 1. It increases rapidly with NTU for small values up to about NTU 1.5, but rather slowly for larger values. So this you can observe from the graph, like when the NTU values are low, the increase in effectiveness as the NTU increases is very rapid. The slope here is high, right? But then it slowly flattens down, particularly somewhere around NTU equal to 1.5. Therefore, the use of heat exchanger with a large NTU, usually larger than 3, and thus a large size cannot be justified economically, since a large increase in NTU in this case corresponds to a small increase in effectiveness. Thus, a heat exchanger with a very high effectiveness may be highly desirable for heat transfer point of view, but rather undesirable from an economical point of view. Okay. So what this means is when you say that NTU is high, it means that either U is high or AS is high for given value of C minimum, right? So generally both of them costs, and if you are now generally you will have certain limitations. So once U is fixed, you can increase NTU only if you increase the surface area of the heat exchanger. The surface area, increasing surface area always comes with a cost. That is, you're increasing the size of the heat exchanger, you're increasing the length of the tubes, etc. So that would always increase the cost. Now, from the graphs, you know that as NTU is higher and higher, effectiveness is always increasing. But then uh, after certain value, right, let's say up at around 3, beyond around 3, if you increase NTU, the growth in effectiveness is quite slow. So cost might be, let's say, the linear function of NTU, but effectiveness is not paying in the same amount. It's continuously the increase delta E or delta epsilon, that is change in effectiveness, right? That is continuously decreasing. So beyond certain value of NTU, it may not be economically feasible to provide more area to get higher effectiveness. Of course, higher effectiveness will always give you higher heat transfer rate, but then there is a limit to how high effectiveness you would like to go up to. Okay, so the cost beyond certain point, the cost may become too high, prohibitive, and you may compromise with a particular value of effectiveness. Second, for a given NTU and capacity ratio, that is CR is equal to C minimum upon C maximum, the counterflow heat exchanger has the highest effectiveness, followed closely by the cross flow heat exchangers with both fluids unmixed, as you might expect. The lowest effectiveness values are encountered in parallel flow heat exchangers. Okay, so this can be clearly seen from the graphs shown here. Parallel flow increases up to around 2, though like if NTU values are very low, then doesn't make much difference, but beyond the 1, you start noticing the difference, and parallel flow hardly increases beyond NTU equal to 2, right? So parallel flow is the most inferior configuration, you can say. Next comes the cross flow with both fluids unmixed, and then the counter flow is the best. The effectiveness of a heat exchanger is independent of the capacity ratio for NTU values of less than about 0.3. So initially you can see that all three graphs are almost coinciding. So for low values of NTU, it may not make much of a difference, but whether you go for counter flow or cross flow or parallel flow. So in case you are satisfied with very low value of effectiveness, you may go for low value of NTU. In that case, it may not make much of a difference whether you go for counter flow or parallel flow or cross flow. Okay. The value of capacity ratio C ranges between 0 and 1. For a given NTU, the effectiveness becomes a maximum for C equal to 0 and a minimum for C equal to 1. Okay. So when C is equal to 0, you get the maximum effectiveness for given value of NTU. So that is shown here for C equal to 0. Now C would be equal to 0 if your C minimum is 0 or your C maximum is equal to infinity. Now C minimum is equal to 0 means no flow. That is generally not feasible, but C maximum is infinite, that is possible, right? So that would happen when there is a phase change. Okay. when there is a phase change, without any temperature change, the heat can be absorbed or can be delivered. So that can happen in a condenser or boiler, and at that time the effectiveness would be the maximum, and that would be given by this formula 1 minus exponential of minus NTU. So that graph has been plotted here. Okay. So when your CR is equal to 1, you get the list value of effectiveness for given value of NTU, and when it is infinity, you get the highest value. Okay. So it may be desirable to go for a high value of CR, and if possible, maybe infinite. That is C maximum equal to sorry, when C is equal to 0, it means C maximum is infinite, right? So that is most preferable, and equal to 1 is the least preferred, right? The value would always be between 0 and 1, okay, because your C minimum is in the numerator. Once the quantity C is equal to C minimum upon C maximum and NTU equal to UA upon C minimum has been evaluated, the effectiveness can be determined from the charts. So these things have been already done. So one of the special case thus is that of condensation and boiling, which would be the best cases in heat exchanger, right? You with lowest value of NTU, the maximum effectiveness is available. Okay. Now, if one has to design a heat exchanger, what are the parameters? What are the different factors on which the selection of a heat exchanger would depend? Right? It will not be only the thermal performance, that is having high effectiveness is not the only criteria. Having high heat transfer rate and high effectiveness, yes, it's the first thing that you will look into and would prefer to have the highest value of heat transfer rate and effectiveness. But there are other parameters which will also affect selection or design of a heat exchanger. So one of them is obviously cost. So budgetary limitations usually play an important role in the selection of heat exchangers, except for some specialized cases where money is no object, right? There are only a very few cases, or there could be hardly any such cases where money is no object. And off-the-shelf heat exchangers has a definite cost advantage over those made to order. So custom-made things are generally costly. The mass manufactured standard sizes are generally having low cost. However, in some cases, none of the existing heat exchangers will do, and it may be necessary to undertake the expensive and time-consuming task for designing and manufacturing of a heat exchanger. So, for a specialized cases or very special applications, you may have to design a special heat exchanger, which generally involves higher cost, because some special application also has a need for the special material or special manufacturing process also. So cost is always a consideration, right? And as we discussed earlier, when you want to go for a higher heat transfer rate, you may go for when you want higher effectiveness, you can go on increasing NTU, but then the cost also increases. So you will have to compromise and settle at a particular value of effectiveness, because otherwise the cost will be too high. And similarly, some material during material selection, for example, sometimes aluminum and copper are very common material which are used in heat transfer processes. So aluminium is cheaper than copper, though the thermal conductivity is better. That of copper is better than aluminium. But many times you compromise for a low cost of aluminium and low weight of aluminium as compared to copper. So cost plays many times an important role in selection of heat exchanger or selection of material. Then the pumping power, right? So anybody would tell that yes, higher heat transfer rate is what one would like to achieve, but many times high heat transfer rate comes with high pressure drop, right? So a very simple explanation can be that if you increase the Reynolds number, then generally the heat transfer coefficient or Nusselt number is function of Reynolds number and some exponent of Reynolds number, right? So if you increase Reynolds number, then heat transfer coefficient would certainly rise, but then the same thing would be responsible for increase in velocity and higher pressure drop. So that would increase the pumping power. So there are two things: one, the initial cost, and second, the running cost. So running cost is related with pumping power also. So if you are pumping a fluid through a heat exchanger, that pump will consume certain power, or you will have to select a pump. If your pressure drop is high, accordingly your pump will be bigger in size or in capacity, delivering higher delta P. So that way, uh, uh, like pump cost is one thing, but then again pumping power will always be higher, which will continue throughout the life of the heat exchanger, right? So that pumping power also has to be considered, and you are concerned about power because you have to pay for consumption of the power, right? Then size and weight, like you may have to fit the heat exchanger in a given volume, and so the size matters, and the weight also, particularly in some special application like not just aerospace but also in automotives. You would want to have a low weight of the heat exchanger. And then the type of heat exchanger to be selected depends primarily on the type of fluids involved, size, weight limitations, and presence of phase change processes. For example, a heat exchanger is suitable to cool a liquid by a gas if surface area on the gas side is many times that on the liquid side. On the other hand, a plate or shell and tube heat exchanger is very suitable for cooling a liquid by another liquid, right? So depending upon the type of fluids that you are going to use, the selection of the type of heat exchanger may change. For example, if you are talking about an oil cooler in for some stationary IC engine, so you might go for a shell and tube type of heat exchanger because you might cool the oil with the help of water, and water may circulate in a closed circuit, and you may use a cooling tower to cool that water and then again to cool the liquid, the oil. Okay, so in this case, because both of them are in liquid form, it may be a good idea to use a shell and tube type of heat exchanger. But on the other hand, you see that the condenser of an air conditioner, it is having air on one side outside the tubes, and the liquid with phase change flows through the tubes. The refrigerant flows through the tubes. So here you can increase the area on the outer side of the tube by putting many fins, right? Closely spaced fins. So there you can go for a, a fin tube heat exchanger, right? So the type of heat exchanger that you select many times depends upon the fluid that are going to be used. Again, let's say in some applications, like in our refrigeration air conditioning lab itself, when you will learn the subject of thermal engineering 2, you will visit the lab and see that you can even have a shell and tube type of condenser also. It's not that the condenser always has to be the way you see for a split AC, right? You can have a shell and tube type of condenser also. So there you might cool the refrigerant with water, and then water is cooled with in a closed circuit with a cooling tower, right? So such a system is there in our refrigeration air conditioning laboratory. So type of heat exchanger many times depends upon the type of fluids that are involved in the heat exchange process. And then the material also many times depends upon the ambience in which the heat exchanger is going to be put, right? If it is a very corrosive environment, then you have to select the materials accordingly, right? It can be stainless steel or a very special grade of stainless steel, or even titanium based material, etc. Okay, so the material selection is again also related with the cost also, but some special application do need some special materials. For example, like a very high pressure, high temperature applications are also the applications which may be considered special, and there you may need some special material which may be costlier than usual commercial material, right? Given a choice, you might go for MS carbon steel only, because it is one of the cheapest construction material. So if the corrosion is not very high, the rate is not very high, not very objectionable, you might go for carbon steel tube material, even for the heat exchanger, right? But then if corrosion is an issue, then you may have to go for stainless steel, which increases the cost many times. Okay. Again, like depending upon the material, the type of fabrication process also may change. Okay, it's very easy to go for welding of MS material, while it is a bit special thing when you have SS, or when you have aluminum, right? So the manufacturing process also might get affected depending upon the type of material that is used. And there could be other considerations, like there are other considerations in the selection of heat exchangers that may or may not be important depending upon the application. Like being leak tight is an important consideration when toxic or expensive fluids are involved, right? If you are if your heat exchanger involves let's say tap water, then you might not be very much worried about the leak proofness. But the moment you use other liquids whose cost is much higher, and sometimes it may not be even advisable from point of view of pollution or environment to allow some liquids to leak. So in that case, if you are dealing with air or water, it may not be a big issue or concern, but for many other materials or fluids, it may be an important consideration. So that, like depending upon the application, there could be very unique other considerations also, which might play a role in design of the heat exchanger.